Okay, so the place where we left off is that we need to basically finish this up by styling these links that are up here. And the way that I want to do it is I want them to be listed horizontally and so that they look like clickable buttons. So the first thing that I need to do is I need to get rid of these bullets. That's the very first thing I need to probably think about. So if I were to go over here, one of the things that I don't want to do is I don't want to tell all of the list items, for instance, to lose the buttons. So I don't want to change my LI rule over here because that'll apply to everything that is a list item in the entire page. Instead, what I want to do is I want to go over here to the banner and I want to look and see where I should do stuff for my navigation. So I have banner styling, so here I've got header styling, I've got aside styling. Oops, I could have put this aside stuff, right, that was up here. I could have put it there, but whatever. That's up to you. All right, so that's where I could have put it. Anyway, for the nav styling, I'm going to put it here where I've got a little comment set up aside for nav styling. So first of all, let's tell it that we want anything that is, first of all, in the section banner header, section banner, copy that. Let's come down here and I'm going to paste it. That is in the nav that is in that banner to have certain kinds of rules. So if we look up here, let's be really sure that we're doing this the right way. I'm going to lower this. So first of all, we have our banner. Okay, and then inside of that nested, we have an article, and nested in the article is a header, which I can collapse. And then we have an aside, which I can collapse. And then we have a nav. Okay, so the nav, its parent is actually not the header. It's the nav's parent is article, and then it's inside the banner. Like I said before, I could put article here if I wanted to, but I don't have to as long as I know that it's the only navigation that's going to appear up here in the banner. All right, because this nav is a descendant of this. Okay, so that's the main nav. And then if you look inside of the nav, what we have is an unordered list that has our list items. And I'm going to tab that in actually so that you can see that it's really clearly nested inside of the nav. So we can have some basic simple rules. First of all, I'm going to copy this empty rule that I just made down in the style sheet. I'm going to copy it and I'm going to paste it underneath it, and I'm going to add the UL. All right, and then I'm going to copy this and I'm going to come down below and I'm going to paste it, and then I'm going to add at the end of that space LI, so that we have three different distinct rules. We've got a nav, a UL, and a list item. And then later we're also going to add some stuff for the anchor links that are inside of that, but let's just start there. First thing I think that I'd like to do is on these list items that are specific to the nav that's in the banner, I want to remove the bullets. That is going to be a property called list-style, and you can see it pops up there. I want the list style to be none. Oops, none. All right, and then those bullets, they disappear. That's how you can change it. It's also how, if you wanted to have different bullets for these other things, you could say list style and all these different options will pop up, and you can fool around with those. But we're just going to take that so that they say none. The other thing that I'm going to do for the list items is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to have them go side by side. All right. To do that, there are some different ways that I could approach it. And probably the best way to do it for buttons that are going to be, really consistently set up in all browsers in the way that I want them to be, taking margins and things like that, is to make them into block. Well, they're already block level elements, but to make them into what are referred to as floated elements. Remember, block level is going to take up as much room as it can take unless it's told to do something differently, like if it's told to have a margin on both sides, or if it's told to have a specific width that's smaller than 100% or whatever. Well, one of the things that you can do is you can also tell it to be a float. And what it will do is make each of these items behave as if they are inline elements. okay, even though they'll still be block level elements. And I'm going to say float left so that they literally will say, hey, I can move up to the block above and sit up above the element, you know, next to me, and right, and they can all sit on the same block. Now, the thing about doing that is that you'll see that they're all squished together, first of all. The other thing that you're going to notice is that, you know, if you were to go up here into the nav and try to give that a background color, you're going to see that it's kind of tricky. Even when I click inside the nav, see how it's trying to highlight it? It doesn't draw a box around it, it just draws a flat box. What's happening is it's collapsing. To show you what's happening, let me draw, let me give it a color. So if I go up here and I say background, let's give it a background color. I'll say background is, let's pick from our color palette. Let's pick this blue right here. Okay, it's this middle color. All right, I'm gonna paste that there. Now let's take a look, and you see it doesn't look like it's doing anything, right? It's being weird. That is because anytime you put elements that are floated inside of something, it makes the parent element or the ancestor element think that it's not actually there. And that's kind of a tricky thing, right? Because you've suddenly, with this float left, you've suddenly changed the physical behavior of a block level list item so that it doesn't seem like it's taking up the right amount of space. And so the parent or the ancestor, it wants to collapse, thinking that nothing, that there's like basically no content inside of it. So if I wanted to give the direct parent of those list items, in which case it would be the unordered list, that's the direct parent. If you were to look up here in the HTML, you've got list item, you know, list item, and their direct parent is that they're all nested inside of this unordered list. I would have to tell the unordered list to have an overflow property of the value hidden. And that doesn't make any sense, right? In some ways, like it's a weird thing, okay? So, but I'm telling you this right now, you need to remember this for the entire semester, that anytime you float something, you need to make its parent container have an overflow value of hidden. That's really important if you want the background of its parent to show up, and also so that it doesn't do other weird things, right? So anyway, so now we've got at least the background showing up, and it's this entire nav color, it's an entire nav that's got the background applied to it. You'll also notice, for instance, that we still have some weird margin things going on, right? So, and remember we had added margins to the unordered list, right? And you'll also kind of see that if I select the UL, like here, you can kind of see that it, right here on the left, it starts like a few M's in, and then it ends a few M's in. And remember, that's because we had told all lists to basically have margins on the left and right. So what we need to do for the one that the list that is in the nav section banner is we need to go here and say margin. For right now, let's just say margin 0, so it's all the way around. Okay, so we're going to set that down to 0. Now, the other thing that you're going to notice is that we have another issue where it's not going all the way to the edge here. All right, so let's do something about that. Okay, and sorry, I moved that around a little bit. The easiest way to figure that out, just really quickly, is actually, you know, you could select the UL over here in this area. You could select nav, right? But it's not really telling me exactly everything. If I go to select the article, you see that the article gets selected, and even the article's got some stuff around it, right? And then if I were to go over here and select the banner though, however, you know, it shows the entire thing whenever I touch it, but it still isn't telling me the same information that, say, Google Chrome would tell me. So let's actually look in Google Chrome so that we can see this properly. And I'm going to right click this, actually, let me get rid of that blue thing. Let me just click off of that. Okay, so I'm going to right click this nav area and I'm going to inspect it. And what you will notice if I hover over it, and I can hover over the UL, hover over nav, I can hover over the header, and you also are noticing like even the header, for instance, right? The header has space all around it as well. Here, let's scroll down. Let's do this a little bit. The article, the entire article, if I select the entire article, it has space all around it. But when I click on section, whose ID is banner, what this is telling me that brackets specifically didn't tell me whenever I was just using the regular live preview, is that it didn't show me this green all the way around, which if you remember is padding. And so that tells me, oh, that's where that's coming from. The padding is coming from the entire, basically the entire banner ID, right? And so there's nothing that we can do to get rid of this padding here unless we adjust what we did earlier on the entire banner. Okay, so sometimes you'll have to go backwards and kind of undo some of the stuff you did and reapply it in a different way. So for instance, we have to get rid, if you look at this, the way it's kind of green up there, we have to get rid of the left padding, the right padding, and that bottom padding. I still like the top padding, that's okay. So knowing that, here, let's actually close this up. Knowing that now, if we go up here and click on, excuse me, if we go up here in our style sheet and we go to our section banner, you see that we have padding all the way around of 2M. Actually, what I just want to do is do padding dash bottom, excuse me, padding dash top, my bad. All right, and then you can see that this just sticks right down to the end. And so we might be okay, right, if we just leave the padding off of here, but if you know that you want to force this to have padding on the left and right, what you could do instead of having it on the entire section banner is that you could put it on the article that is inside of the section banner if you wanted, but then again we have the same problem. Wait, the nav, you go the nav, that's actually inside of the article, so no, you actually couldn't do that, right? You could go and put it on the header, right? Because that wouldn't be affected. You could also put it on the aside if you really wanted that padding to apply to the left and right up here. So that's up to you. I'm going to leave it off for right now, and we're going to just change this section banner to have a padding top of 2M, and then you see how it dropped down for the navigation. So let's come back down to this nav styling area. All right, so now that we've gotten rid of that padding, I'm going to go ahead and save my style sheet, by the way. I haven't saved it in a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead at this point, and I need to tell the list items how big to be. All right, because right now they're all just sort of sitting right on top of each other. Well, I have 3 of these things. So the first thing I think I'd like to do is tell them how wide that they should be. So let's say width is going to be, let's say 33.33333% or something. And the more specific I get about that, the better it's going to be in terms of, you know, exactitude, I guess. The issue that you might see is the word miscellaneous stuff is pretty long. So maybe I'll just, in my HTML, maybe I'll get rid of the word stuff. Let's just get rid of that word stuff because it's really unimportant to say miscellaneous stuff, right? And so I think that I'm okay with about me, goals, and miscellaneous. And the reason that it's automatically doing a text align center is because remember we put a rule up here, or I should say a property up here for everything inside of the entire banner to be text align center. And so it's aligning the text inside of those list items in the center, because an anchor is still a form of text. It's just a special type of text. All right, so at least those are being centered now, so that's good. And now it looks like we at least have some basic buttons. The issue that I have with this at this point, though, is that I want to get rid of these current styles. I want to get rid of the underline, and I might want these to look a little bit different. All right, but remember, I can't just change that on the list item. I have to actually, let's just try it. I'll show you what happens. If we say color, let's do something really obvious like color red. Didn't do anything, right? Well, that's because we have to change it on the actual anchor. But I don't want to just make it on every anchor in the page. I want it to only be specific to the anchors that are inside of these list items. So I'm going to copy this, come down here, start to make a new rule. I'll put the A tag at the end. All right, and then let's try color. Let's just see color red. Ah, it did work. All right, I don't want it to be that color, but you can see immediately that it worked. All right, so instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell it to be some color from my style sheet. Actually, let's just say color red, and then what I can do is I can right click it really easily and say quick edit and jump to my editor. And instead of red, let's say that I actually want it to be this this sort of off yellow, this light yellow color, right? And let's see how we did it. Actually, let's say that we want it to be just plain white. Let's say that we like it plain white. All right. And I want to remove that text decoration as well. Remember that? We talked about that before. So we'll say text decoration is none. I'm not going to put any kind of underline. And I'm also going to remove the border that's here. And we'll say border none. And we can say all the way around there's no border, and it makes it go away. All right, so now the border is just gone. All right, perfect so far. But now I want it to be obvious that it's some sort of link, because right now it doesn't do anything. It doesn't tell me it's any kind of link. So I want it to have a hover state. First of all, let's go up here and let's tell it what color to change. Now, to do a hover state, if you remember, we would have to have a colon hover at the end. I need to copy this whole section or this whole selector set right here. I'm going to copy that and make a new selector set. And I need to do where it says A and then immediately, no spaces, colon, hover. And I'll also do my curly braces. And for this, I can, tell it to be a different color. So let's try doing it like this, and I'll right click and I'll change the quick edit. And let's say that here's where I want that yellow color to happen. So I'll commit to that. And you can see that when I come over here, I hover over it and it changes. Now the other thing too, in some browsers that you're going to notice now, and see, it just gave me a pointer. In some browsers, if you don't get a pointer whenever you're on top of links and you want to make sure that you get one, what you can do is you can tell it what type of cursor to have. So you can say, let's do this again. Let's say cursor like this, and you can tell it to have a pointer if you ever need to be explicit, and that means it'll give you like the little hand right here. Okay. Now I want you to notice one thing though that is kind of a tricky thing, is that it's not actually, I have to hover right over the word, and you want them to be kind of big clickable buttons, right? Well, the problem with this, I'm not sure why that's not indenting properly. Anyway, here, let's do this. If that ever happens, you can select everything that's in your rule and you can do Shift Tab and it resets it, and then you can tab them back in again, and then it should work okay. Anyway, for an anchor tag, remember that they are natively a form of text, and that means that they're naturally inline elements. If you want to give a background color, just so you can see where the anchor tag is actually actionable and clickable, you can give it a background color of something that is kind of obvious. Like let's do, I don't know, let's do gray or something, right? And then you can see it pop up really easily. Well, the problem with this is that, it's really a limited amount of space, and so it makes it really hard to kind of click inside of there. So what I like to do for my buttons is I like to make my anchor tags block level elements. I like to make them act as if they're block level. So what you can do is say display on the A tag. You can say display, and then you're going to change the type to block. All right, and look what it did. It automatically made it expand so that it literally fills up everything that it can inside. And there are going to be occasions, like if you had added, for instance, if you had added any kind of margin to the anchor tag, then it wouldn't fill up everything inside. It wouldn't behave that way because you're actually pushing other element edges away from it, right? So but if I say display block, sometimes you might also have to tell it to be the width. You might occasionally have to tell it to be width 100% for some browsers. And what that does is it makes the A tag sort of act like if you had a balloon inside of a box and you blew the balloon up, it would literally fill up the entire box that it was in. In that case, it would be like the A tag being the balloon that fills up the list item. All right, because remember the list item, we told it to be a width of this and, you know, so on. And if you also had to add a height of 100%, you could do that as well. You don't always have to do that. Sometimes you do, though, depending on what you're attempting to do. And I actually don't want this background color, right? I just wanted to show you now. If I hover, you see the little pointer, it turns into a cursor or into a clickable link way outside of the actual text itself, which is wonderful. So anyway, I'm going to get rid of this background gray because I don't want that to happen. And instead, what I'd like to do is make these have a hover state so that they change. And to do that, I can go over here under my hover and I can give it a different background color. And remember, right now the background color is actually being set by the nav, which is an ancestor of this A tag. But if I change the background of the A, remember the A tag is basically, it's nested inside of that nav, as in, it's a descendant of the nav. So the A background color is going to show up on top of the nav background color. So anything that we change on hover for the A background is going to actually show up. So this is where we could tell it to be maybe a slightly different color. If we go here to our palette, I don't know. Actually, you know what we could do? We could have it be the same color, actually. And we can just change its opacity if we wanted to do it that way. So the original color of this nav is right here. Let's copy that. And I could paste that there. And then what I could, do if I wanted to change it here is I could do an RGBA, or I could also just come over here and I'm going to do a test. And oh, it's not changing. Remember, it's not changing because it's the same color. So actually, let's use something that's totally different. Let's just say blue, for instance. All right. Now it's changing. You can see that it's changing. All right. So, but the point of me doing that is that if I have it be the exact same color, right, over here in the inspector, I can right click. Let me show you how this works. This is kind of cool. In the inspector, I can, here, I'm going to open this up in a different kind of way. I'm going to actually dock it to the right. We'll take up a little bit more space this way. And you can see what's happening a little bit better. So here we've got this A tag selected, and we have our rules showing up down here below. And what I can do is see this :HOV. That means that while the thing is selected that I want to test, like I can click the hover button and I can click on hover here, and then it'll show me the hover state, which is kind of nice. So it tells me that this is the background color. What I can do is I can click on it and I can change it to RGBA here, and I can start to lower the opacity significantly. And I could also change it so that it becomes a different color, right? Like maybe it's this darker blue or something like that, but it's still in the same blue range, right? And so I can make it so that it's a lower opacity. And, or, I could also do this. So however you want to do that, like you could monkey around with it like that. I'm going to hit return, and I can copy this value. That's one way of doing it. I showed you another way of doing it earlier. Now, you might look at that and go, okay, well, that's still like, I still can see so much of this nav background color. Well, let's say that, for instance, here, let's get out of this hover state. Okay, and let's stop checking on that. And actually, what we might want to do at this point, it seems like it's behaving a little oddly, is I'm going to go ahead and close this session, and then I can go back over here and I can open up a new live preview session. Okay, and then you see that it is catching the hover states. Well, if I don't want this color to be so solid upon initial, like this initial blue to be solid, maybe I want to see a little bit of this background pattern in the background image. What I can also do is I can make it so that this is an RGBA value as well. I'm actually just going to copy this RGBA value that I just created in Chrome's inspector, the one that's the A:hover. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to change the nav background to that RGBA value, and you can see immediately what happens, right, is that it already looks a lot different. So that might change a lot also about how I want, you know, the other one to look. But let's say that I don't want it to be 0.74, maybe I want it to be 0.85, so it's a little bit brighter, but I can still sort of see through it. And then, you know, you might want to also change the way that this bottom one looks, like maybe you want it to be darker. All right, so in this case, if I right click it, I can say quick edit, and maybe I just want it to be a much darker color, you know. So it's really, it's kind of up to you, and then you could increase the opacity because you want it to look a lot darker. And then if you come over here, you can see how that ends up looking, right? So anyway, these are some different things that you can do to style your page. And I'm going to end this here. You could keep on going so that you add more padding and places and things like that. But, you know, if I click that, it jumps down to the right place in the page. It's still working, but now it's styled a little bit better than that original HTML, right? Okay, so everything seems to be working pretty well. Back to top works. It seems to be working fine whenever I adjust it this way. All right, so this is a good place to stop, and now you've got your second assignment done, mostly, right? This, if you followed my tutorial to the T, then what you need to do at this point is you need to go in and you need to actually style it with your own styles, your own colors, your own background image, your own typography, all of that stuff. You don't have to have this be a circle, things like that. You know, the only other thing I probably would have done that I think would have really looked nice, actually, now that I'm looking at this, is I think I would have probably put a text shadow on these links. And if you want to see how I would do that, just really quick as a reminder, if I did a quick search, let's say I can't remember where I used a text shadow. While I am in my CSS style sheet, if I do Command F, right, or Control F on Windows, I can do a find for text shadow, right, and here we go, right here. This is down in the footer, so I can copy this. Let's say that I want to use that, and I want to scroll back up to where my styling was for the nav styling, right? And I can add that to my, I want to add it to the regular anchor state, not to the hover, because I want it to actually stay on the hover. And then you see that it's there. Oh, wow, that's way too dark though, right? So some of the text shadows that you used in these other places where it was really dark, you might not want to use, right? So, you know, maybe you do want this on the hover state. Let's just copy this. Let's say that I'm going to copy this whole text shadow, because maybe I like it on the darker hover state, right? But maybe I want it to be a lot more subtle. For instance, let's say that it's like 6 or something like that. And also maybe the spread's a little bit bigger. Maybe it's a 3-pixel spread. Sorry, 3-pixel blur, not spread. In this case, it would be a blur. And then I can also maybe make this 1 pixel. All right, so that's not so heavy duty. All right, and then it gets heavier on hover. So it's really up to you how you want to do that, but go ahead, make all of your adjustments that are unique to yours, and you know, if you turn something in that looks identical to mine, you haven't really done the assignment properly. You've only sort of done the demo, basically. You haven't done your own unique stuff. So I want you to explore with your own styling, your own color palette, your own background images, all of that stuff. And if you want to put a background image on the body and not just where I put them, that's fine. However you want to do it. Okay, that's the end of the lesson, and I look forward to seeing your work.